Every year, we come together here, marvel at the view, and strengthen our resolve to preserve it. This year, we arrive again. Our ambitions are bigger because our obligations are too large to measure, and our opportunities too substantial to squander. At Microsoft, we bring unparalleled sustainability commitments to over 33 million square feet of real estate around the world, creating modern workplaces where nature is the building block of our designs. Because thinking sustainably, building sustainably, living sustainably, and working sustainably is in our nature. So this year, let's commit ourselves to making Earth Day every day.
Good morning, everyone. This is Perry Carter from Bdpa, Washington, D.C. This is day 3 of our 5th annual Earth Day Tech Summit. This week, we have very exciting panels and discussions and presenters. We had Industry Day for day 1, Media Day was yesterday, and today our 3rd and final day is Career Day. And as you know, in April 2017, we started our Earth Day Tech Summit series, and our focus is on tech and cyber careers for for startups and for students and professionals. And we want to basically make sure that we include those opportunities in tech and cyber across air, land, sea, and space domains. And we've actually mapped these opportunities to private sector, public sector, and academia. And in many cases, in the public sector, we also have our defense and intelligence community as well. So for those not familiar with BDPA, BDPA was started back in 1975 in Philadelphia as Black Data Processing Associates. And our mission is to pretty much enable upward mobility of underserved communities and African Americans and other minorities in computer science, information technology, and the STEM fields. We also evolved with our Student Information Technology Education and Scholarship, or SITES programs. And those include in our portfolio a high school computer competition, which was established in 1986, the IT Showcase, which was established in 2002. It also includes the Mobile App Showcase, which we launched in 2014. And as we evolved over the years, we instituted a publication known as BDPA Today. It is now almost in its 15th year. It was established in 2007. We also support the HOPE Project here in Washington, D.C. That is a very exciting program where young men and women get certifications from CompTIA for Information Technology Fundamentals, or ITF Plus, A Plus, Network Plus, and Security Plus. We also launched in 2015 the Tablets for Teens program, where we provide brand new tablets or notebook computers for students in our SITES program and students in Title I schools and junior ROTC cadets in Title I schools. We also have cyber and robotics competitions throughout the country. Other chapters include smart city showcases. And we also are now moving forward toward a more robust junior ROTC tech inclusion programs. So this morning with us, our first hour, we will be featuring the Department of State. And starting off this morning will be Mr. Aaron Sampson. And Aaron will be speaking on the OES program, Oceans, Environment, and Sciences. And again, he has some very exciting stories to tell and some new mission sets that may be interesting to those of you interested in STEM. So without further ado, Aaron, please and welcome to Earth Day.
Great, thanks. Happy to participate. Thanks for asking me to join. My name is Aaron Sampson. I'm a Foreign Service Officer. I've been a Foreign Service Officer for almost 20 years at this point. I'm a political officer in the State Department. The State Department's divided into various cones. I'm a political coned officer. My experience with the State Department actually started as an intern in 1999, over 20 years ago, when I spent a summer in the embassy in Djibouti, in East Africa. It wasn't exactly, I didn't ask the State Department to send me to Djibouti. They suggested they have an opening in the internship program in Djibouti. So I said, okay. And it ended up that the embassy, for staffing reasons, other reasons, ended up consisting of myself and the ambassador for 4 months. So I really got a view of everything that happens inside an embassy. Being a political officer as an intern, it was a really interesting and neat experience, which turned me on to the State Department. So certainly I'm a fan of the internship programs that the State Department has. As a political officer, as a Foreign Service Officer, I've served mostly in Africa, Guinea, Mali, Uganda. My most recent assignment was 3 years in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I've also had several assignments in Washington. I've been the Special Assistant to the Assistant Secretary for African Affairs. I've been the Africa head of the head of the Africa office in the Bureau of Democracy and Human Rights. And for the last year, I've been covering Africa and also the Middle East for the wildlife team in the Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs. This is actually something new for me in the State Department as a generalist and somebody who, I'm kind of an African politics junkie. I follow a lot of African politics. I work on African politics. Moving over to OES, which is the acronym for the Bureau of Oceans, Environmental and Scientific Affairs, has been interesting to me because it's not something that I'd really had a lot of experience in the State Department seeing what OES does. So I'm in charge of combating wildlife trafficking in Africa and the Middle East. I also coordinate something called the U.S. government's Presidential Task Force on Wildlife Trafficking, which is an interagency task force that's comprised of 17 different federal offices and agencies. So you've got Fish and Wildlife, Department of Justice, USAID, Treasury, all participate in this Presidential Task Force on Wildlife Trafficking. Wildlife trafficking is of interest to the U.S. government because it's a massive international crime activity. I mean, the estimates are that international crime syndicates are taking in billions and billions of dollars per year trafficking wildlife. So we're talking about ivory, rhino horn, pangolin scales, live animals, whether they're birds, reptiles, primates, you name it. So it feeds into a lot of criminal networks. These criminal networks are the same networks oftentimes that are trafficking not only wildlife, but also weapons, drugs, humans. So it's of interest to the U.S. government to disrupt those trafficking networks. Also, there's a serious zoonotic disease risk, which is getting more and more attention, obviously, of late. But when you're trafficking wildlife parts, particularly when you're trafficking live animals, the risk of spread to zoonotic diseases is much higher. OES brought me in to ramp up their focus on Africa because I know Africa and I've been there for some time, almost 25 years. I've been working on Africa. I started as a Peace Corps volunteer in Central Africa many years ago. And it's been interesting because it's been a learning curve for me to understand everything that happens in OES, which is kind of the scientific node of the Department of State. There aren't so many Foreign Service officers in OES. I'm one of a handful of Foreign Service officers. Most of the people in OES are civil servants who have an extraordinary amount of expertise in a lot of very specific areas. So there are multiple offices in OES. I'm in the wildlife team is housed in something called the Office of Conservation and Water. There's an Office of Environmental Quality. There's an Office of Global Change. There's an office that focuses on international health and biodefense. There's an Office of Marine Conservation. There's an Office of Polar Affairs. There's an Office of Science and Tech Cooperation, and there's also an Office of Space Affairs. So it's been interesting to me to realize that, wow, there are all these folks in the State Department who have really serious scientific backgrounds. Many people have advanced degrees, PhDs, certainly master's degrees, who are the career civil servant folks who are working on these issues. It's also been a challenge for me, and it's been very interesting to try to bridge the foreign service side, where I'm a generalist, and I've gotten a lot of knowledge of country specific or regional specific or political things, trends in the regions I cover. I also have a lot of familiarity with how U.S. embassies work overseas, and bridging that with civil servants who are generally served in Washington, but have a tremendous amount of technical expertise, but maybe have less familiarity with the regions that they're covering because they haven't had a chance to spend a significant amount of time there, or also are less familiar with the way embassies operate internally because they haven't been posted to embassies like I have. Also working with some of the interagency partners that work on wildlife trafficking, whether it's Fish and Wildlife, which has a number of folks who are working internationally, whether it's on law enforcement issues or more analytical issues, or with the CITES treaty. Certainly Treasury is looking at things like money laundering related to wildlife trafficking. Department of Justice looks at obviously legal cases regarding wildlife trafficking. So I spend a lot of time also working with interagency partners, following up on information. One of the things that I've also discovered since I've started with OES over a year ago is there are a number of NGOs that have a tremendous amount of information on wildlife trafficking. There are NGOs obviously that are working with parks around the world to train park guards or give them technology or communications ability or other things that will improve their ability to protect parks, arrest poachers, things like that. But these NGOs also have a tremendous amount of information about the networks that are trafficking live wildlife or wildlife parts. So I work a lot with them to figure out how to share the information that they have and better understand it and analyze it and make sure it's shared with key folks in the US government that are interested in this. I also work very closely with embassies, our embassies, US embassies in Africa and the Middle East when, for example, there's a trafficking case that happens where somebody, law enforcement, for example, will interdict a container full of several tons of pangolin scales or ivory or a good amount of rhino horn. Oftentimes I work with our embassies overseas who have people on the ground who have contact with local law enforcement to follow up on the investigations, provide any investigatory support if they need it, hopefully track down, who was behind these shipments, which is often very hard, but there is some progress that is made. So it's been a little bit of a shift for me, having spent 20 years working on African politics, to move to a bureau that is really focused on scientific issues and has such a deep expertise of often civil servants who've spent an enormous amount of time researching these issues, perhaps before they join the State Department, and also they continue to research them after they've joined the State Department. So I personally, this was something that to me, I'd heard about OES, but I wasn't really aware of the depth of policy expertise that it had. And it's pretty remarkable to me how much information they have, and it's often a challenge to try to figure out how can I share this with my foreign service colleagues in embassies overseas to make it readily understandable and kind of translate it into a language that policy folks will understand, because bridging the gap between academic research or scientific research and then policy is often a big challenge. The other thing I would just briefly say is that our State Department does have a lot of internships. There are a number of interns in OES. Unfortunately, internships of late have been virtual. Hopefully hopefully it'll revert back to people being in person at some point once we're through with the pandemic. But certainly for folks who are really interested in science and technology, looking at an internship in OES gives you the ability to bridge both your interest in scientific related research or issues and then also try to apply them in a policy way on the global scale, often to a specific region or part of the world. But there certainly are a number of interns in OES. And the interning with OES, I think, is a little different than interning with other parts in the State Department because it carries that kind of heavy scientific related component where it's not just following local politics or working with host country government officials on a broad range of issues. You're really focused on one or two things. So for example, my office, there are people who work on water issues. I work on wildlife issues. There are people who work on forests, forestry issues. So it enables you to kind of focus specifically on your area of interest. We have a couple interns now. One person I think who'd studied lions in East Africa and is now working with us. There are other folks who are very interested in water or forests who are interning right now with OES. So that it gives you the ability to pursue your interest in science while at the same time trying to bridge the gap between scientific research and academic research, and not just U.S. government policy, but policy of countries around the world, whether it's regional countries or international organizations and institutions that make big decisions, whether it's CITES or WHO or things like that. There are a lot of possibilities to see how people try to bridge the gap between science and policy. I can stop there. That's 15 minutes if that's okay.
Aaron, that's great. So we do have some questions. One of the questions is, how do you communicate with everyone and share data when you need to, especially in the environments that you're in? And unfortunately, even like here in the United States, we have underserved communities, we have news deserts, we have food deserts, and where you are, they're real deserts. So tell us about the challenges, and where do you see our team, next generation students, how can we help resolve those issues?
Sharing information is a real challenge. The first challenge is getting the information. So, where I work on wildlife trafficking, there are a number of countries, areas where there is a significant amount of information, and most of the information, interestingly enough, comes from NGOs that are specialized in this, and this is what they do: is wildlife conservation and wildlife trafficking. So they are tracking arrests, interdiction of containers or suitcases full of ivory or rhino horn. They're working with local law enforcement all around the world. They have very close contacts. There is another bureau in the State Department called INL, which provides a lot of funding to a number of these NGOs to do that kind of work. So there are a number of NGOs that are collecting data on some places, but there are a lot of places where there is no data, either because it's very hard to work there, it's not safe. So for example, certainly one thing that my office has been taking a close look at is cheetah trafficking from the Horn of Africa through the Gulf. What tends to happen is traffickers, low-level traffickers, farmers, herders, they will trap cheetah cubs in the Horn of Africa, and then they will pass them off to somebody who then smuggles them up through the Gulf states, often passing through Yemen. It's very hard to get information from Yemen because Yemen's in the middle of a civil war. So getting the information is one challenge, and there are a lot of gaps, and certainly identifying the gaps and then trying to get NGOs to find a way to fill those gaps. So for example, another place there's not a lot of information is the Central African Republic, also because it's very unstable. But there are some NGO folks, there's some parks, there are people who run primate sanctuaries, there are people who run pangolin sanctuaries who do have information, and it's a matter of getting their contact information and reaching out to them and getting to the point where they're willing to share some of the info. Oftentimes the info doesn't, the data comes in ways it's not compatible. So, you're comparing apples and oranges sometimes, and you have to kind of use some analytical approaches to figure out, okay, how does A compare to B? And then once you have data that you could think is, reliable and of interest, then the question becomes, how do you share it in the U.S. government? And that also is a challenge. Oftentimes you have to figure out a way to package it because people in the US government are very busy. They don't have a lot of time. Certainly in US embassies, they're covering a ton of issues at once. So trying to make it, finding a way to relatively quickly encapsulate, hey, this just happened, here's some data, here's how, making it accessible and readable, and then explaining this is why it's of interest to the US government that we expend a little time on that. And so I do spend a lot of time, and that's where I fall back on my experience as a Foreign Service officer to say, okay, I have data from a very scientifically focused NGO, which is very interesting to me. I'm going to try to convert it in a way that I think will resonate with Foreign Service officers in the field so that they can understand why it's important and they can see why it's of interest and why we should follow up and do something on it. And that's, I think, where my expertise and added value often comes in as a Foreign Service officer, as somebody who doesn't have a really extensive background in science, but I do have a lot of knowledge of how embassies work and how Foreign Service officers process information. Well, I think you're on mute.
Thanks. Sorry. One of the follow-up questions is, what is an NGO, and then how does State Department identify which ones to work with?
Yeah, so when NGO, non-government organization, of which there are tons and tons, and pretty much any field. The NGOs that work on wildlife trafficking, I mean, there's NGOs like World Wildlife Fund, which everybody's probably familiar with. There are NGOs that get grants from the US government, from the Europeans, from other governments to do a whole range of things in the areas that I work in. A lot of them end up getting grants to manage large parks in Africa. So, where I was most recently in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there's some very large parks. There's Virunga Park, there's Garamba Park. Those are managed in large part by non-government organizations that get funding from international partners because it's very expensive to do that kind of management. So they get money to manage, park guards, train the park guards, make sure they're equipped, do all the things that you need to do to keep a park running and hopefully attract tourists, which oftentimes is what, the real amount of revenue. But when you're in a place like, Congo, where there's not a lot of tourism for a number of reasons because it's not very safe, you can't really rely on tourism revenue. A lot of other NGOs do investigative things or work with local authorities to improve their capacity to track trafficking of wildlife. And in the meantime, they obtain a lot of information, either in partnership with local organizations, or they're doing research, or they're being funded by the US government or other governments around the world to do research and studies to accumulate the kind of information and data we need to make policy decisions. How do you decide which ones are the ones to support? That's a really good question. It's a process of getting to know the NGOs, knowing their history, knowing their capacity, seeing what they're able to produce. I mean, there are a number of NGOs which are very well known and respected and have been around for years and years and years and years, and that they produce top quality stuff. A lot of them hire away people from the US government or other governments, or former law enforcement people from around the world, former retired. So the folks who are working on wildlife trafficking, who are working with, say, local police departments in Africa or the Middle East, I mean, a lot of these folks are former security officials from either, they're retired US people, they're retired Brits, they're retired Australians, they're retired South Africans. So some of these NGOs, they're very well known. They've got a lot of capacity and expertise. Then there's some smaller NGOs that maybe aren't so well known, but might be doing something a little quirky that's a little interesting. And sometimes, you get to know those NGOs and you see what they produce, and they have a report or two, and you say, wow, this is really interesting. The big NGOs aren't focusing on this, but it's really fascinating. And then, oftentimes there are ways to find a way to support them, or at least find a way to work with them to try to, get information, access the information they have, or steer them towards looking at things that would be of help to the US government to have a little more info.
And Aaron, I have 3 more questions, and we'll conclude with those. One is, what are the largest obstacles, and you just alluded to some of that, but what are the largest obstacles both US and the NGOs face when resolving the wildlife trafficking crisis? If you can just highlight. Yeah,
I mean, one is, obviously the traffickers are are very well funded, and they're very savvy, and they're able to shift around pretty quickly. So you shut down one route and they'll create another one. There's really no end, it seems, to people's capacity to traffic things. So that's a really tough challenge of keeping up with the traffickers. A lot of things have moved towards online sales or things like that, particularly in the pandemic. So keeping up with that is always a challenge. Distances obviously involved, particularly with the pandemic. It's hard to do things remotely from Washington. I would also add bureaucracy is a challenge for the U.S. government. The U.S. government is a really big bureaucracy. The State Department is a really big bureaucracy. Sometimes getting things done, moving quickly is a real challenge. And it takes a lot of coordination, and you have to talk to a lot of people inside your own organization to make sure everybody's on board and everybody's supportive of what you're doing. It's necessary because you need to make sure everybody's going in the same direction, but it takes a lot of time. Funding is also a major issue. I mean, a lot of these NGOs that are working on these things, they require huge budgets, whether it's travel or supporting people who are working overseas, and there's not an unlimited amount of funding. Corruption in a number of countries is an issue. I mean, it's frustrating, for example, to work on wildlife trafficking in, say, country X, and then you find out that officials in country X are working in cahoots with the traffickers. That also is a serious challenge.
And it looks like another question was answered in the chat. The final one here is, what are the main security issues one may find when having to package and send information to the government and other organizations?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I fully understand. I mean, in terms of sharing information with the U.S. government, I mean, we have our own internal processes, so it's not really an issue. Certainly, we do share things with host country governments all the time, and we vet and make sure that everybody's on board when we share something with them. Oftentimes, we share information with host country governments to encourage them to take action or to coordinate with us to provide information. NGOs also, I mean, we do share information with NGOs. There's kind of a process to kind of vet the info we share, and but the more you can share, the more info you get back. So it's always helpful to find a way to have very kind of open exchanges with people working on the issues you're working on, so that you can share information and make sure everybody's kind of aware of what's going on in the field.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much. This has been very insightful, and I'm sure if we have any other questions coming your way, we'll work with you and Yolanda and get that to you and our students. But thank you so much for sharing your time this morning with us on our 5th Annual Earth Day Tech Summit.
No problem. Happy to help.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So those still online, we actually have one question that was addressed, had to do with internships. And in the chat, the virtual internships, or VSFS, applications open in June of this year and normally run throughout the collegiate academic year, September through May. So we'll be right back after these messages.
On a stormy night in Philadelphia, with only a kite, a house key, and wet hamstring, Benjamin Franklin captured lightning in a bottle. Over 260 years later, with a little resourcefulness, ingenuity, and grit, we're not only capturing energy from the sun and wind, we're storing it. So even when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, we're still powering America forward. As the nation's leader in energy storage, and as the world's largest generator of wind and solar energy, we're ensuring Americans have the energy they need, whenever they need it. This is our era. This is America's energy era. NextEra Energy.
Welcome back, everyone. Our next presenter is Dr. Yolanda Kearney, and she joined the United States Diplomatic Corps as a Foreign Service Officer in 2004. She served as Counselor for Public Affairs at the U.S. Embassy in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Public Affairs Officer at the U.S. Mission to Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean, and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, Public Affairs Officer at the U.S. Embassy in Jamaica, Cultural Affairs Officer at the U.S. Embassy in the Republic of Cameroon, and Economic Officer and Chief Counsel at the U.S. Embassy in the Republic of Guinea. She is the recipient of several Department of State Meritorious Honor and Superior Honor Awards and the Lois Roth Award for Excellence in Cultural Diplomacy. Dr. Kearney is a proud alumna of Howard University, from which she earned undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral degrees in music history and literature and religious studies. Before joining the Foreign Service, she served as a music historian at the United States Library of Congress. And Dr. Kearney, welcome back to BDPA. Glad to have you this morning. How's everything?
Thank you. All is well. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you for having me. I am excited to talk with your students, and I'm so happy that they had a chance to hear from my friend and colleague, Aaron Sampson. We served together in both Guinea and in the Republic of Congo. And so he talked a lot about being a Foreign Service officer versus civil service. And so now I want to provide some more sort of information about how the department is structured for both employment opportunities in the future, and then more immediately for internship opportunities. So in typical government style, I would like to share a PowerPoint. Don't be too dazzled. So really quickly, I want to tell you what it is that we're looking for. We are aware of our pale male and Yale nickname. It is true that over the history of the State Department, there have been a sort of a handful of feeder schools that have fed into the State Department and into the Foreign Service. We're looking for, frankly, a Foreign Service that looks like America. We want you to bring all of your authentic self to the table to discuss and craft foreign policy and implement that foreign policy. And also, I want to do a little myth busting today. All academic disciplines are useful in the Department of State. So it is true we have lots of lawyers, we have lots of people who study international affairs, but I need you to know that you can take your STEM background and your STEM degree and have a beautiful and wonderful career in the State Department. And I will use myself as an example. As you just heard, my undergraduate and graduate degrees are in music history and literature. My doctorate is in religious studies. And so all academic disciplines are useful in the Department of State because there is nothing in diplomacy that does not touch on every single academic discipline that there is. Really quickly, we're at 276 posts in 191 countries. And the reason you care about those 191 countries is that when you start thinking about internship opportunities, you can serve at our embassies or our consulates abroad. So literally the world is available to you when you start looking for internship opportunities. We are headquartered in Washington, D.C., but we have passport agencies in almost every state. And we have field offices. There are diplomatic security field offices. There's a media hub in Miami. There is our financial services center in South Carolina. So there are many places where when we serve domestically, it's not necessarily in Washington, D.C. And these are also places where you can apply to intern. Very, very quickly, we are about 78,000 employees. 13,000 or so Foreign Service employees. About 8,000 of us are Foreign Service officers like Aaron and myself. About 6,000 Foreign Service specialists, including our IT guys and women. They are Foreign Service specialists who make it possible for us to do our jobs. And then about 10,000 or so civil service employees. Those are the folks that Aaron was talking about. They have specific information and specific expertise on a particular topic, and they work on that topic or issue or region of the world throughout their career. And then the largest number of us, though, are our almost 51,000 locally employed staff. These are Foreign Service nationals at our embassies and consulates abroad. They serve with us for 20 or 30, sometimes 40 years. What are we looking for? We are looking for these 13 traits. So think about this when you craft your application for your internships also. These are things that really any employer would want. Clearly, you want people who can maintain their composure, who are strong with their communication skills, who obviously are resourceful, have a good judgment, initiative, and leadership. But these are the things that we recruit for and evaluate against. So when you're thinking about employment or internships, make sure that you keep these 13 Foreign Service dimensions in mind. We'll talk a little bit about becoming a Foreign Service Officer if that is your desire. Choosing your career track, I will put in the chat a way for you to figure out what these different career tracks are and which of them might be best for you. Registering for the Foreign Service Officers Test, the Fsot, that is the first step to joining the Foreign Service. After the Foreign Service Officer Test, there's something called the Qualifications Evaluation Panel, then an oral assessment. Everyone who works for us has to be able to secure a top secret clearance and a worldwide medical availability clearance. And then there's something called suitability review, which is something like, I don't know, like the admissions, like the admissions council for a university. You look at the entire packet and figure out if this person is going to be suitable for the Foreign Service. And then finally, based on the scores coming out of the oral assessment, you're placed on a register for each of the 5 career tracks. So let's talk really quickly about those career tracks. And these are also things you should keep in mind if you were thinking about interning. They are consular, economic, management, political, and my own career track of public diplomacy. So consular officers are the main reason that we exist. There is nowhere in the world that Americans might not get themselves in trouble. And so if you've ever lost your passport when you've been abroad, if you've fallen ill, then you know that a consular officer came to your aid. We do things like visit Americans who've gotten arrested. We see them in jail. Unfortunately, sometimes people die abroad. We are responsible for making sure that they return home safely. So all of the things that make sure that Americans can travel the earth safely, that's in our consular career track. And then obviously they also are very, very focused on proper adjudication of visas to make sure that people who visit the United States are the people who should actually have the opportunity to come and visit, study, work, whatever it is that they plan to do in the States. And then for people who adopt abroad, and there are many Americans who do that, they also assist with that. Our Foreign Service Economic Career Track is where I want to spend most of my time discussing with you, because this is where you're going to be able to take your STEM background and your STEM skills. So econ officers do all the things that you would normally expect. Yes, they're going to talk about imports, exports, trade, commercial advocacy, all that is true, but they are also where you find our ESTH, Environment, Science, Technology, and Health officers. So when the whole world was having a huge discussion about 5G, the people who were actually writing that policy, what's the United States going to do with 5G technology, who is going to be responsible for making sure that that technology is rolled out equitably, those are economic officers, because they are also technology officers. Right now, when it comes to issues like health, health policy, the coronavirus, all of the things that are associated with the policy around that, those are actually our econ officers. Now, they are not like CDC or NIH, they're not medical practitioners, but again, when it comes to the policy, how is it that the United States is going to mitigate the effects of the coronavirus? It's our health officers who do that. And why are they econ? Why are health officers under econ? Because the health of a population influences the economy. So environment, you just heard Aaron Sampson talk about all the things that go into protecting the environment. If you have interest in climate change as a policy issue, you want to make sure that your voice is heard, and you want to make sure that we do the right things moving forward on climate change. Econ is where you're going to find them. And again, when you think about it, there's no way to have a robust economy if if the earth is falling apart. So remember, again, if you are interested, ESTH, Environment, Science, Technology, or Health, the career track for you and the opportunity to intern for you is going to be in the econ career track. Our management career track officers are essentially our chief operating officers. They are responsible for everything that happens within the mission. They manage all of our embassy real estate. Every officer has to have, employee has to have some place to live when they're abroad. Who's responsible for all of those leases? What happens if something goes wrong with the property? They're responsible for all of the personnel and HR issues. Every embassy has a health unit. The med unit responds to the management officer. When it comes to our accountants, our financial management officers, they report also to our management officers. All things IT fall under the management officer also. So if you're thinking about how do these huge operations actually function from day to day, it's management. You will find it. If it has to do with making sure that the embassy is going to run and that embassy employees are going to be able to do their jobs, it falls under management. Political officers, Aaron Sampson, that you just heard from, he is one. They are the things that I think most people think of when you say diplomat. They are the ones who are going to tell you the so what. So CNN is going to tell you that there were tires burning outside of the embassy. The political officers are going to tell you, so what? What does that mean exactly? Are the tires burning because the opposition has overthrown the government, or are the tires burning because the teachers haven't been paid and they and their students are striking? So beyond just what the news tells you, the news is going to tell you the facts. The political officers are going to tell you the so what. They're going to get into the analysis and tell you what the facts actually. In my own career track of public diplomacy, we focus primarily on two tracks. On the one side of the house, we have press and media relations. So we're responsible for all of our forward-facing and public-facing communications. That means our official website. That means our social media platforms. It means that if you're the public diplomacy officer, you're the speechwriter for the ambassador. All of the things that will be made public, those are the things that fall under our press and media relations. On the other side of the house, there are educational and cultural affairs. So if you are in a foreign country, if you're abroad and you see that an American artist is going to be performing, a good 90% of the time, it's because they have coordinated with the U.S. Embassy to make that possible. And so we bring American artists, American lecturers and others to other countries to help explain the United States and provide a broader perspective on what it is that we do. And then finally, on the educational side of the house, the traditional exchanges that you may have heard about, things like the Fulbright program, where international scholars go to the United States to study and lecture, and then American scholars also go to other countries to research and lecture. Those types of programs, those exchange programs, also rest under public diplomacy. The final piece is that our public diplomacy officers are our grants officers at embassies also. So if you've ever seen those photos of an ambassador holding a huge oversized check, the person who wrote that grant and made sure that everything was in order before the money can be handed over to an NGO, a non-governmental organization, or some other entity and country, almost always that's going to be the public diplomacy officer who is the grants officer who wrote that grant. So where do we train? Where is all this happening? It's at the Foreign Service Institute. Foreign Service Institute is right outside of Washington in Arlington. It's not just for the State Department. We train many of our diplomatic partners in our sister agencies. We are divided there into these 5 schools. The School of Language Studies. So if you join the Foreign Service and you've been assigned to a particular country, we're going to teach you the language that you need to learn. It becomes your full-time job. When I joined the Foreign Service, I studied Spanish and German. I needed to learn French, which I did in 26 weeks, and went off to my first post. The School of Professional and Area Studies is where we learn our statecraft. So if I'm a public diplomacy officer, I'm going to learn everything I need to know about public diplomacy. If I'm a consular officer, I'm going to learn everything I never wanted to know about the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1980 as amended, and so on for each of the career tracks. Our School of Applied Information Technology is where our IT professionals learn essentially how to make sure that we are able to communicate securely in all sorts of environments around the world. And so we have teased out Applied IT as its own part of the Foreign Service Institute because a great deal of what we deal with is classified, obviously. And then the School of Leadership and Management, we do take leadership and management very, very seriously in the Foreign Service. And so there are required courses for us at every step of the way in our careers when it comes to leadership and making sure that we are able to support our staff. And then finally, the Office of the Historian is also housed at the Foreign Service Institute, which is also a place where you may apply to become an intern. It's an interesting history that the State Department has. Really quickly, this is a snapshot of me and my career. These are my flags, the countries to which I've been accredited. As I said, I joined the Foreign Service in 2004. At the time, Colin Powell was our Secretary of State. In the middle, I'm greeting Nikki Haley in the Congo. That country was in really interesting extra-constitutional space because elections were delayed by almost 2 years. And then the final photo is me clutching the podium for dear life in my first ever press conference as our mission spokesperson. Very, very briefly, if you want to contact me, if I am your diplomat in residence, I cover DC, Delaware, Maryland, West Virginia, and Northern Virginia, then you can reach me at DIR, Diplomat in Residence, DIR DC Metro at state.gov. Yes, my name is spelled this way with those 2 O's, Yolonda. My parents decided to anglicize a Spanish name, and your autocorrect is going to tell you that they are mistaken, but it really is spelled that way. If I am not your diplomat in residence, I'm going to put in the chat a link so you can find who your diplomat in residence is. My 15 colleagues are amazing. They've all had really interesting careers, and they can tell you everything you need to know about either joining the Foreign Service or interning for us. So with that, I'll stop sharing and I will take your questions.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
Really appreciate it. So one of the questions we have earlier is, where do we go to volunteer our time with an NGO or to any of the NGOs that you work with?
Honestly, I don't know. I can't tell you about NGOs. I can tell you how you can intern for the State Department. But there are, as Aaron said, I mean, literally tens of thousands of NGOs, and each of them will have their own process for how, if they even accept volunteers. In some cases, they don't. So I wish I could tell you more. But
yes. So what you're saying is that pretty much all the internships we're talking about now are actually paid positions now for state.
Not all of them. The State Department traditional program is actually unpaid, okay, because most students are able to secure college credit for it.
Okay.
There is a program, and you will see it in the links that I just gave you, US FSIP, the U.S. Foreign Service internship program, which does pay for you have to be at least a rising sophomore because it pays for 2 summers. But most of them are unpaid because people secure academic credit for them in exchange. I see a question about healthcare related positions and thank you for asking that question. Yes, if you are interested in taking your medical background on the road, you absolutely can. So every embassy has its own health unit. We hire physicians, we hire nurse practitioners, we hire physician's assistants and lab assistants to run those health units. So. And we hire psychiatrists also to make sure that we stay healthy because we've seen some stuff in some countries. So if you are thinking about, oh, I think I want to, sort of specialize in tropical medicine, or I think I want to, just care for people in what is more of a family practice setting, because, my son we went to post with him when he was 7 weeks old. So all of his childhood inoculations he received in an embassy health unit. So it is more like family medicine. I keep hearing that from our nurse practitioners and our physicians. They like it because they're not sort of honed into any one specialty, and they have the chance to really take their time with their patients in a way that unfortunately most physicians and nurse practitioners don't. So I will put a link to our med positions in the link. How can I prepare for the FSOT? I'm so glad you asked. On May 8th, I'm going to have an overview of the FSOT. You will put the link to it here. It's an hour and a half because we talk about the way that the test is structured. Why is the State Department asking me these questions? Or is it just hazing? And so once you understand how the test is structured, I think that you're much better prepared for it. And so in that way, you have the opportunity to understand what it is that you need to know to prepare for it. It is not a test for which you can study, to be perfectly honest, but you certainly can prepare. And once you're prepared and know what it is that's expected of you, then you can expect to perform better on that test. Am I missing any of these?
No, ma'am. I think maybe one more question may be coming in.
Social media challenges. So here's where I need my STEM my STEM superstars. So I just thank you for asking this question. I just came out of the Congo, where French is the official language, but Lingala is the franca lingua, along with Chuluba and Swahili in the east, and Kakongo. So when people engage us, obviously they're going to engage in their mother tongue. So part of what we do is to make sure that we have, remember those 58,000 or so Foreign Service nationals, make sure that we have enough representation on our teams so that we have language and cultural issues covered. But yes, it would be great to be able to automate a little better. Some languages are still somewhat obscure. The auto translation services for Lingala are as pathetic as you might imagine. So if you are interested in working in that field, I promise you that there's a place for you, because Microsoft and the boys are trying to figure out how to get a foothold in sub-Saharan Africa. There are about 110 million native speakers of Lingala in both Congos and the Central African Republic, and everyone has a phone, right? So it's one of those things where sometimes we're a little late to the party, in the same way that Microsoft, I think, was a little late to the party when it came to Chinese and what to do about those Chinese characters. That is definitely a place where we're going to see a lot of growth on the tech side of the house in the future.
Okay, so we have one final question that just came in.
Sure.
I can read it. This is, how does the State Department hire policy research consultants, Foreign Service, and what can we do in high school and undergrad to stand out in our political officer applications?
Right. So here's the thing. We don't have a requirement, an academic requirement, to join the Foreign Service Officer Corps. Can you imagine? You don't have to have any credential whatsoever. There are a couple of people who've come straight out of high school who are incredibly well read, and they took the Foreign Service Officer test, went on to orals, joined the Foreign Service. We have not found a particular credential that is a good predictor of success in the Foreign Service. Instead, what we found is those 13 Foreign Service dimensions that I showed you, and there's a link to them in the chat. Those are the people who can best convey those 13 Foreign Service dimensions are those who are going to be most competitive. So there are a couple of things you can do. The Foreign Service Officer Practice Test link is a good way for you to get a diagnostic. It's a great diagnostic tool. You can take it, see where your strengths and weaknesses are. And it's excellent because those are real Foreign Service Officer test questions that have been retired from prior iterations of the exam. So you take that, you see how you did, find out the areas where you need to strengthen. Immediately after that, in the chat is the suggested reading. If you have some weaknesses, there's a suggested reading list that we've culled so that you can figure out, I need to bone up on, I don't know, organizational management. Oh, great. The State Department has identified a text for me to help, figure out how I can get smart on that thing. So that's the way to sort of prepare for that. In your undergraduate studies, really, it's to make sure that you read broadly, that you are intellectually curious, to make sure that you have studied a little bit of everything, to be perfectly honest, including some philosophy. You need to understand exactly how the world works and how different people think. Some comparative religion, a little bit of that. There are so many theocracies around the world, and so they function in ways that we don't in the United States, and you need to be aware of how the world works. Definitely a language is not required, but it certainly is useful for you to have studied some language, some modern language, and just a little bit of everything. But whatever you decide to major in, I promise you that there's nothing in the Foreign Service that doesn't touch on that. So again, my doctorate is in religious studies. My dissertation focuses on the political activities of religious institutions, which is to say, in Central Africa, what were the churches doing when it came time to help, choose the next president? They were doing things that we don't normally do in the United States. They were drafting legislation. They were, registering folks. They were sometimes putting folks up to be poll monitors, and et cetera, et cetera. All sorts of things that don't normally happen in that region. So when people think, oh, religious studies, what does that have to do with the Foreign Service? There's that, and then there's an actual Office of International Religious Freedom, because we do monitor these issues around the world. So there is no academic discipline that does not touch on what we do in the Foreign Service. Don't choose something thinking, well, I think I'm going to hone my academic background so I can get into this field. Instead, choose something that really resonates with you, do incredibly well, and then I promise you, you're going to find something in the State Department. Someone somewhere is focused on what it is that you were studying, up to and including gastronomic diplomacy. That is a thing, the diplomacy of food. So
that's exciting. And we have one more question to close out this session. Are you sure we students can be ready for this future?
I am sure. Someone is going to pass the Foreign Service Officer Test, and someone is going to pass the Foreign Service Oral Assessment. So why not you? Yes, it is competitive. Yes, there are people who have taken many bites of the apple and try before they get in. But someone is going to pass these exams, right? So why not you? Yes, you can absolutely be ready for this in the future. You absolutely can.
Why not you?
Why not you?
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. This has been exciting. We will continue this dialogue. We'll definitely invite you back for other events and other info sessions. And thank you so much. And at this time, we're going to actually take a break. Our next guest, very similar, is also a Howard University alum. Yep. And so we're going to go into weather, which of course affected, I know, in your area as well. So we're going to look at weather forecasting, supercomputers, modeling, and that is an area that STEM students as well, no matter where you are, the weather controls everything on planet Earth. And we will be back right after these messages.
Now, when any department goes out into the community, we're able to hear the positive responses. And that is a great feeling to know that what we're doing is affecting and impacting the community. In the past, we've heard negative responses about the city being unclean, there's a lot of trash on the ground, or the police, we never see them.
It was important for our residents to feel as though that government was going to be responsive.
People were relying on a 9 to 5 being able to contact about any issues that they had.
We put together a very innovative app that gave our residents access.
IBM assisted the City of Sea Pleasant to incorporate Watson into the My Sea Pleasant app. Any resident who has a question that they want to ask about the city on a 24-hour basis can go into the app and click on Watson to ask it a question.
We had a tree fall, and instead of having to call City Hall, I just went and used the chat and said that there's a tree falling in the middle of the street, and they sent Public Works out to get it for me.
I've used it to report potholes that are in the street. I've used it to see what's going on in the city.
No matter where our Public Works director is, no matter where our employees are, they're able to log in because it is on IBM Cloud and get the service request in real time and respond, in a quick and efficient manner.
It allows them to get to us sooner. On a weekend doesn't matter because it comes through, I'm going to get it. So I love it. I don't see how we ever did without it.
Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our third final day of the 5th Annual Earth Day Tech Summit. I'm your host, Perry Carter, and with us for this segment is Dr. Carlis from Noaa. He currently is the Deputy Director at Noaa's Global Systems Laboratory, or GSL, and Noaa stands for National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. For CyberEarth 21, Dr. Carlis is no stranger to BDPA's Earth Day Tech Summits. He actually participated in our inaugural Earth Day Tech Summit back for CyberEarth 17 in 2017 on a campus near his alma mater, Howard University. We were in the N3DC incubator. Dr. Carlis is a meteorologist, and he serves as the Deputy Director at GSL since September of 2020. GSL is a world leader in the development of storm scale to global scale weather prediction models, aligning GSL research with Noaa's objectives. He comes to GSL from the Weather Program Office, where he established the Earth Prediction Innovation Center, or EPIC program. Dr. Carlis enjoys working between science, policy, and society to ensure better products and services for the American people. Now, while spending over 18 years at Noaa, he began his career as a graduate student in Noaa's Office of Education, Educational Partnership Program, or EPP. Soon after joining Noaa, he was stationed in Honolulu, Hawaii for 3 years of intensive weather research, numerical model development, and dissertation writing. He held positions at the National Weather Service Environmental Modeling Center as a research meteorologist, developing the world's most widely used weather forecast model, the GFSM model, or as many of you have heard, the Global Forecast System Model, as a policy advisor to NOAA's chief scientist and NOAA's assistant secretary of environmental operations and prediction. In 2016, he wrote a children's book entitled MIT, Meteorologist in Training, and he loves people and is excited to call Colorado and GSL his new home. Dr. Carlis, welcome aboard again, sir. Glad to have you this morning.
Thank you so much, Perry. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so excited to be here again today. Just, being a part of the member of the BDPA community and supporting our young people because you guys are our future. This is going to be a presentation that'll kind of take you a little bit around Noaa and what we do. I'll tell you a little bit about my career and some of the experiences that I've had and how I've transitioned throughout the agency. And I look forward to any questions that you have. Please feel free to put questions in the chat box. I may be a little bit animated or a little bit loud during the presentation because I know you guys are probably a little bit tired of all these videos and all of those kind of things. So in order to keep your attention, I will try to be, entertaining at times and tell a few stories, those kind of things, so that you don't, fall asleep on me, basically. So again, I want to talk about monitoring the pulse of the planet at Noaa. Of course, Noaa stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We're part of the Department of Commerce, and we have 5 different line offices within Noaa. And so I'm going to walk you through some adventures at Noaa. And so Noaa, our mission really is science, service, and stewardship. We are the protectors of the planet. In our mission, our purpose really is to understand and predict changes in climate, weather, oceans, and coasts. And I'm more so involved on the weather side, being a meteorologist. I study, pretty much the today all the way out to the next 14 days. We call that kind of the weather regime. Versus climate is more so out to 2 years and 2 years plus, 2 years to 100 years, you could call climate in terms of time scale. We also want to share all of the information that we collect with others. We are the conservation managers of coastal and marine ecosystems and resources. And if you look at this particular graphic, you'll see in the top left these satellites. I'll talk a little bit about satellites in that top left corner. I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that we do on ships. We have people that go diving, that study the marine ecosystem. We hire oceanographers. We hire pilots to fly through hurricanes. We hire, just scientists to record data. These buoys that sit out in the open ocean are an excellent way to collect data and monitor the pulse of the planet. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of these things as over the course of my talk, but I want to kind of start with some of the education programs because that's really how I got started within the agency is through the Noaa Office of Education. We have a program called the Educational Partnership Program for Minority Serving Institutions. Of course, I'm a Howard University graduate, and so getting into a program like this actually allowed me to move over to Hawaii. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but Our undergraduate scholarships, we have a ton of them. You should go take a look at Noaa Office of Education, do a search for it, and just learn something about some of the different programs that we have and some of the different disciplines that we're looking for. It's not just scientists that we look for. We look for policy experts. We look for software engineers. We look for computer scientists. We look for economists to come in and help us to explain our mission and to achieve our mission. And so we also give grants to K through 12 programs and informal education programs. We have a Teacher at Sea program where we take teachers and they join us on one of our research missions on one of those research vessels that I showed you a little bit earlier. We take cruises. We have, I think, 16 Noaa ships where we go out and we collect data across the entire globe. And so there are so many different opportunities for you as students to learn really about the world and to experience the world. I know Dr. Kearney just talked a little bit about State Department. We work closely with the State Department on climate policy issues. And so many different things that you can do within the agency like Noaa. Now I want to transition and talk a little bit about my journey. So I'm originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, born and raised. I went to Washington, D.C. I moved to Washington, D.C. at the age of 17 to attend Howard University. And during that time, I attained my bachelor's of science degree in chemistry. I originally thought that I was going to be a biologist. I went into college thinking I was going to be a biologist, going to med school. However, once I got through biology, I felt like, this really isn't the career choice for me. And so I transitioned and switched my major over to chemistry because I really liked solving problems. I really liked, sitting down and writing out the problems that needed to be solved and, actually putting pen to paper to actually solve them versus, biology was a little bit more memorization. And that really wasn't my particular forte. And after I finished my bachelor's degree, I moved on to Honolulu, Hawaii, because I joined Noaa in 2002 as a PhD student. And I was getting my PhD in atmospheric science, meteorology at Howard University in a program called the Noaa Center for Atmospheric Science. And so I joined Noaa, at the ripe age of what? I was like 25 years old at that time. And Noaa said, Danae, we really want you to take a position out in Honolulu, Hawaii. And so I talked to my wife about it. And I said, honey, you know what? They asked me to move to Hawaii and take a position out there. What do you think about it? And she was like, well, why not? We can do it. We're young. Let's go for it. And so we moved to Hawaii, and we lived in Hawaii for 3 years. Some of the greatest times of my life living out there. And then at the end of that particular time, I decided I really wanted to be a numerical weather prediction modeler. And the only place that I could really do that within the National Weather Service was over in back in Washington, D.C. at the Environmental Modeling Center. And so I had some conversations with some different folks, told them that I was really interested in coming back to Washington, D.C. And 2 months after I had some of those conversations and interviews in some sense like that, there was no job that was put out for that. But they said, Danae, you come on back. We got a spot for you back here at the Environmental Modeling Center. And so I spent a good 7 years of my career at the Environmental Modeling Center before switching over to work at the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, which is our research arm within Noaa. And so these are just some different pictures of me and my sisters when we were young. I have to give a shout out to our current Vice President, Kamala Harris. That is a picture of her and her sisters on the campus of Howard University. And then those two pictures are kind of back in DC, you wear a suit a lot for sure, especially working, going down on Capitol Hill. But now, we're in COVID land, and I sit at my desk most of the time, like I'm doing right now, and sit down on video chats and have meetings all the time. I hardly ever put on a suit jacket, but that is me. And I'll hopefully in a little bit you'll be able to see video of me after this presentation is over. So, there's really a lot of paths to career success. I've held positions as a research meteorologist. I've been a policy advisor to NOAA leadership. I've been the weather portfolio advisor. I've been a program manager, and now I'm a deputy director. And the one consistent thing in that is that I was trained to be a research meteorologist. The policy advisor and weather portfolio advisor and program manager positions, I really wasn't trained to do that. And so as a scientist, as an intellectual person, intellectually curious person, you figure out ways to actually get the job done. So you go into these positions as policy advisor or some type of program manager, and you get some training, or you do some reading, or you go to YouTube and you try to figure out what it is that particular position actually requires. And so I've had so many opportunities where I've had to just try to figure it out. And if you look at my career, it hasn't been like my career has been like stepwise. I'm always climbing that next ladder. Every particular job is a promotion. That's not the way most careers work. Sometimes you'll get a promotion and then you'll have to do a lateral position or a horizontal position where you actually kind of go across. You don't get any new money. You don't get any new authority or anything like that. It's just your job changes. And so for a good portion of my career between 2014 and 2020, it was pretty much I was doing lateral moves, and where it was basically a horizontal move so that I could continue to grow my career. And so when you think about careers, they're definitely a windy road. There is no straight line and no straight path up towards getting your career going. And so there's so many ways you can look at it. So don't necessarily look at it as I need to continue to move up, 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 up. There's ways you can move to the side and get an opportunity, learn some new things, and help to progress your career. And so, let me talk a little bit about being a meteorologist. So most people, when they see meteorologists, they'll say, "Hey, what do you do? Are you on television?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not on television. I'm not that guy on that bottom right corner. I'm definitely not the guy that just kind of comes out and looks up at the clouds and says, oh, yeah, the temperature is 60 degrees today. It'll be a high of 65. What I actually, my grandma, when she was alive, she thought meteorologists studied meteors. No, not really. I think some of my friends think, meteorologists are always out chasing storms, like hurricanes and tornadoes, like on Twister, the movie or something like that. No, that's not really what I do. And so I'm more so in the middle here. I studied math a lot. I solved equations, solved problems, but I also put those mathematical equations and algorithm development into actual computer simulations. And so that's what I actually do. Sit at a computer, develop numerical methods, and use high performance computers to get that accomplished. And so at NOAA, observations are really important. You got to collect data. And these are all of the ways that NOAA collects data. We have data, we have radars, which is that bottom right corner picture. If you ever been driving around and see a big ball standing up really tall in the air, white ball, that's an actual weather radar, and it's surveilling the atmosphere around it. And we also have what are called buoys. We have buoys that sit out in the open ocean, which is that top left picture, and they just float out there. They have instruments on them. We have engineers that help to support them, and the ships that we have within our fleet, they go out and service those buoys. And then we also have sites at airports. That top right and the bottom left are basically many of the airports around our country where we put observation sites out there to collect information. And all of that information is actually collected by the National Centers for Environmental Prediction. And that information basically goes into our weather prediction models, which is what I was talking about a little bit earlier, of studying weather prediction and using supercomputers and algorithms to create a forecast of the weather. And so I wanted to show you guys a quick video of basically a balloon launch. And this was me and some students, some interns. We went out to a National Weather Service office and we were able to launch that balloon. That orange thing is a chute. It's a parachute. Hold on, I'm gonna get back to it. They're about to launch the balloon here. And so you got to move away because it's windy out there. There's an instrument called a radioson attached to it and it's long string. And so we're about to launch this particular balloon with a few students. And as this balloon goes up in the air, it's going to collect temperature information. It's going to collect humidity information, wind information. And there it goes. And there goes the instrument going along with it. And so we do these balloon launches at over 160 locations in the US. And there's thousands of locations across the world where we do these. We do them at the exact same time twice a day so that we'll know exactly what's going on in the atmosphere at a specific moment in time. And so that's how we collect observations across the vertical transport of the atmosphere. Now I want to talk a little bit about satellite observations. You know, in the US, we monitor the planet through our satellite systems. We have tons of partners that are out there. We have really three types of satellites, right? We have what we call geostationary satellites that basically sit at one particular point in the upper levels of the atmosphere, like 30,000 miles away, and they just take pictures. It's like an eye in the sky, and it just takes pictures of the Earth, and it rotates along with the Earth, right? And then we also have what are called polar orbiting satellites. Now, these polar orbiting satellites are those red arcs, basically, and they are very close to the Earth. They don't sit at 30,000. They sit at probably about 12,000 miles above the Earth's surface, and they basically just rotate around the Earth. And as the Earth rotates, just imagine the Earth rotating and that satellite going across in different swaths across the Earth. It takes pictures of what's going on around the Earth, and we get all kinds of information. And all of this information actually goes into our weather prediction models. And it provides information so that we know so that we can do predictions on what could actually happen. And then we also have a satellite that we call our Discover, which basically points at the sun. That's in the top right corner. And it sits at a Lagrange point, and it basically just measures solar winds, solar information from the sun. Of course, we all know the sun is extremely important to the survival of Earth. And we have these satellites and we monitor all of these different activities. If you ever heard of a solar flare, these solar flares can basically impact our communication systems here on Earth. And so it's a must that we monitor all of these things and as we go along. And so when you think about the space race, there are a ton of countries out there that have satellites sitting out there in space, collecting information. There's some really high resolution, probably DoD type satellites out there as well that NOAA doesn't get, or the public doesn't get access to. But you look at all of the different countries out there that are basically monitoring the planet. We are definitely not the only ones. The US is not the only ones doing that. All right, so this is just a quick movie loop of our current satellite conditions. As you can see, this is the geostationary satellite. So you don't see any movement because the satellite picture just rotates right along with the Earth. So it looks like no movement except for the clouds. So we had a nice storm out here in Colorado this past week, where we got about 6 inches. As you can see, this particular system here is definitely impacting the East Coast and mid-Atlantic areas over the next coming days. And so all of this kind of information is what NOAA uses to monitor the planet. So next, I want to talk about a couple of kind of modeling activities, weather prediction activities that NOAA is moving forward, that I've been involved with, that I'm really excited and proud of. We're really moving towards a unified weather forecasting system. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is by engaging scientists in the community, engaging people that are interested in developing weather prediction models. And so one of the things that we've done is that we've put our code on a server on a platform called GitHub that we use. These are all of our algorithms that we use to actually do predictions, right? And so when we do these predictions, we have to use, computer science and coding and all of those types of things. Our codes are written in a language called Fortran. Many of you probably have heard, probably have not heard of it, but it's one of the best scientific program languages out there. And so we've been on this road, this windy road of, releasing the global forecast system model back in 2019, selecting a dynamic core for it, releasing it to the public in 2020, doing upgrades to our numerical weather prediction systems within the National Weather Service. And we've been doing this not in a manner that we've done it in the past. We've been doing this with a community of model developers, because there's a ton of scientists out there at universities and in the private sector that are interested in weather prediction, because number one, they can make money off of it. And number two, people want to do research, and people want to do research at times with systems that actually go into an operational environment. And what I mean by that is that if I'm a researcher at a university, at Howard, if you give me access to the operational code base, I can contribute my science and my intellectual capital to this unified forecast system that basically is going to go into an operational environment and that can help people. So if I'm a scientist and I'm really interested in helping and moving forward, advancing the state of science, but also helping our forecasts, helping us to provide better forecasts for the nation, I can work within this framework to develop my to do my scientific studies, and I'll still publish my papers. I'll still go out and give research talks about the research that I'm doing, but I also am connected to the operational, the impact, things that impact people on a daily basis. So if you look at this, if you look at that graphic on the top right, we released our codes a little bit earlier than this, but this is like June 18, 2020. We had over 1,000 views of our code. Now, as we kind of go along, we're more along the lines of almost hitting up to 6,000 views of our code base, and we have over 1,000 downloads. These number of clones basically means the number of downloads of our particular code base. And so what we're all doing as a community, and this is where, you do open source development, you do things like working with people that don't sit within your particular workspace. You can work with people that sit in a university, that sit at home, that are interested in numerical weather prediction. People are running this code on PlayStations, is what I'm hearing. So this is a really exciting paradigm for the agency, for Noaa. And so what we're developing is numerical weather prediction models that look like this. As you can see, this looks like a satellite image, but it's not. This is actually a actual algorithm that uses mathematical equations to predict the weather. This is not this is a simulation of what could potentially happen. And if you look kind of in the middle, you'll see different hurricanes spinning up. They're moving counterclockwise. You can see one right there. There's 2 or 3 of them right in the middle of this particular image. And this is all just science. This is just math, creating these kind of images and forecasts. So I love that. That's pretty cool. Now, the last thing that I'll kind of talk about is the Earth Prediction Innovation Center. I was the founding program manager for it. It is a new member of our broader research community within Noaa and within the kind of Earth systems community, science community. It was authorized in the NIDIS, National Integrated Information System reauthorization of 2018. And really the focus is on partnering with the community. I talked about it within the UFS code base, the Unified Forecast System code base, but now we're putting together a innovation center to help support and enable community engagement of the Unified Forecast System. And our vision really is about building the most accurate and reliable operational weather forecast models in the world. And the mission really is about being the catalyst for research and community modeling to accelerate our advances of operational forecast systems. And so we want to provide better products to the nation. That is really what we're working towards. And so building a community of developers and modelers that are interested in solving the world's issues. They're going to need access to high performance computing. They're going to need observations. They're going to need data. They're going to need different tools. And so EPIC is going to be one of those centers that will provide that kind of information. And so I want to close with talking a little bit about some of my keys to career success. For me, it was really important that I had a big support system. Like I said, I come from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I did not, know that I really wanted to be a meteorologist growing up until I learned more about Noaa. So having a great support system of my parents, my wife, was really important in terms of me being able to achieve some of the things that I've been able to achieve. The next thing is really having an opportunity. You guys attending events such as these are opportunities for you to learn about different career paths and different opportunities of how you can decide where you really want to move your life in the future, and just learning from other people. This is the day that I joined Noaa back in 2002. Many of these people that are in this particular picture are still some of my closest friends within the agency. They all still work within the agency. That's one of the craziest things is that, with the Noaa mission, people absolutely love the Noaa mission, and they are extremely passionate about our planet and the protection of our planet. And so these people all still work there, and I'm still really good friends with many of them. And being a part of this particular program was really a great opportunity for me. And then for me, I needed inspiration. I needed to see myself in different people. This particular picture is of 3 former presidents of the American Meteorological Society. the guy standing to my left, the older gentleman, is the second African American to receive a PhD in atmospheric sciences. The guy to his left is the current director of the National Weather Service. And then the guy to my right, Dr. Marshall Shepard, just one of the most prominent meteorologists, climate scientists in the world. This guy does so much for the community, the weather enterprise, by writing blogs and hosting students. He's a former NASA scientist, and just seeing people like that is really an inspiration to me, and that's one of the reasons why I actually come out and do some of these talks like this. And then, the other thing is, what you really want to be known for is action. When people ask you to do something, they want to be able to trust that you can get it done. And this particular picture was me dropping an instrument off of an airplane. I talked about the airplanes that we have, the Hurricane Hunter airplanes, and these Hurricane Hunter airplanes fly into and above the hurricanes that are impacting the U.S. And they drop these instruments in there so they can collect wind information, temperature information, humidity, all kinds of weather information, so that information actually goes into the algorithms that are basically run to give projections on where the hurricane will actually go. Will it impact Florida? Will it impact the state of Louisiana? Will it impact the coastal Carolinas? All of those things. And so being a person that gets things done and being a person that someone can trust is extremely important to anyone's success. So I encourage you guys, when you do start your careers, or even today, when people ask you to do something, make sure you follow through. You want to be someone that they can trust. And then this last slide is really about leadership. And with George Floyd being murdered last year, I mean, so many different communities basically stood up to say, this is wrong. And George Floyd was his murder really impacted a lot of different communities, and it absolutely impacted Noaa. It absolutely impacted the geoscience community and the atmospheric science community. And I encourage you guys to really think about who those inspirational leaders are that you want to follow after. One of my most inspirational leaders is Dr. Vernon Morris. He's now at the Arizona State University. He's a former professor of Howard University. He gave me an opportunity to really develop myself as a scientist, as a person, as a young African-American man. Seeing him being young as a professor was really, truly inspiring to me. And he is absolutely he is the top producer of African-American PhDs in the nation. Like, seriously, one guy has produced over 30 African-American PhDs in this country. And if I were to give you the statistics in terms of the number of African-American PhDs in America, in the US, that number is not very large. And for him to have 31 African-American, and it's probably more now, 31 African-American or pretty much Black and brown people that he really works with, he nurtures, he pushes, through the process. He trains us to be meteorologists and atmospheric scientists and chemists and all of those kind of things. I mean, this guy has done so many things, and he's that small guy in the gray shirt right over here, small but mighty, right? So with the No Time for Silence is something that he led. It's a group of scientists that wrote about anti-racism and a need for true leadership and allies and advocates with respect to ending racism in the geosciences. And so I wanted to end with that because leadership is important. It's essential to how we move forward as people. And I just encourage you guys to be brave. Don't never shy it down. Don't minimize yourself. You are special. You deserve to be in the spaces that you're in, and you deserve to call it out like you see it. So I encourage all of you guys to continue to work towards those kind of things. I appreciate the time, and I'll take any questions that you have.
Dr. Carlis, this is exciting. We have a lot of questions in the chat room, but I really wish that you showed up at my career day back in high school and junior high school.
Really?
And yes, sir. Those that know me, I was always into maps.
Yeah.
I created like globes. I was out of using a ball and some putty around the side.
Right.
I was really into it, man, as a kid. But this was very exciting. And every time we come back, every year, we see something new, something exciting. But I'm going to open up the floor right now for the questions. You and I can geek out on this all day long, but this is for the kids.
All right.
So one of the questions that came up, I need to go back a little bit further, but let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay. For political science majors or poli-sci majors, how would one help Noaa on Capitol Hill with like policy appropriations? And if you can touch on, let's see, infrastructure acquisition. And when you look at the supercomputers and high performance computers that you mentioned earlier, where do you see this next generation helping Noaa transition to like quantum technologies or things? Because everything's getting faster.
Right.
The algorithms are getting better. And every summer we look at the hurricane forecast, we see those cones of uncertainty are down. Now they're actually cones of certainty based on how deep these supercomputers now crank them out and all of the different models you guys use. So walk us through that, please.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks. That's a great question. Political science, I would definitely say at the policy level, we have congressional affairs people, we have international affairs folks that have political science backgrounds. We hire lawyers within our general counsel, Noaa general counsel as well. So having that kind of background and being able to really talk to the issues as it relates to the science that we do and understanding the science and how science can influence policy is one of the things and one of the translations that we need political scientists and environmental scientists to actually help us with. If you look at Congress, if you take a look at Congress and the number of people in the House, in the Senate that have scientific degrees, ask yourself that question. How many people do you think in Congress have scientific degrees? I'll tell you, the last time I looked, and it was like 2 years ago, it was 2 people. 2 people with science degrees in the House, in the Senate. Now, they also have staff. They have staff that have expertise in different scientific areas, but I'm definitely here to say we need more scientists sitting in congressional, seats. It's not good. Science needs to be at the forefront of how we make decisions. Just imagine, people making decisions about the future of our country without having, the support of science and the support of people that understand how science can help us to be an even better and greater nation. It's similar to the climate debate, right? So we have to have our scientists having a seat at the table with the political scientists so that we can actually have really smart conversation. And then when you think about how we move into some of these areas of quantum computing, of course, the private sector is going to lead the way. Absolutely. But when you think about the difference between the private sector and the federal government is budget. the federal budget is extremely large, but the federal budget is also very spread out all over into different parts and activities. You got DOE, you got State Department, you got of course, the Defense Department and the Navy and some of the things that they do. Those folks are really leading the way in terms of quantum computing. We're waiting on those chips. Scientists at my laboratory are really working towards exascale computing, which basically is similar to quantum computing, where we need to basically develop algorithms that work on those particular systems. And so once we start to work towards that, once the either the private sector or the government tells us that these particular systems are ready, we're going to be ready from a weather standpoint to be able to use those systems and deploy some of our weather prediction models on those particular systems.
Yes, sir. And we do talk about supply chain management. It takes a while to get those systems, to procure those. So you're right. We have to work with Congress and the staffers and the professional staffers there. But in fact, we will invite you back to our next major event on October 18th. That's Exascale Day.
Oh.
And so last year we had 3 webinars. We did it out. We have it also on our playlist. But I think that's a perfect time to bring that up, to talk about, okay, what do we need to do? And we bring in the media and the political wonks to really have a conversation. We probably can't solve that today, but I appreciate that answer.
Absolutely.
So, yes, sir. So we have another question. One young lady wants to know, in your career as a meteorologist, what has been the most groundbreaking innovation employed in your field?
Groundbreaking innovation. There's been a lot of them. I wouldn't say I'm the person that's done the groundbreaking work. I've definitely used working in an organization that's more operational. It's you don't get a lot of groundbreaking work done. You're more so taking research that's being done, the groundbreaking research that's being done outside of your organization, and translating that into an operational environment. Most of my career, in terms of me being a scientist, has been spent there. So you look at just imagine, I think our first satellite was flown back in 1976, where we were actually able to get pictures of the Earth. So think about that.
Yeah.
Before that, how did we know that there were hurricanes, except for when the wind started to blow really strong?
Right.
Those kind of things are really being able to put, satellites into space is one. And then how do you use the data that you get from the satellite? And how do you get the data from the satellite back down to Earth? That is all engineering. That is all groundbreaking, science that's going on. And then once you get the data, okay, what do you do with it? What format is the data in? How do you develop, codes, using probably Fortran or some other type of code where you can take that data and you can integrate that data into a weather prediction model.
Yep.
Right? Those are some of the really we call that data assimilation, where we take the data that comes in some kind of format. It's a bunch of information. We need to write code to read it, and then we need to assimilate it. We need to basically take that code and put it in a format where a numerical weather prediction model can actually read it. It actually means something to the equations that the weather model actually has, right? And then we have to actually integrate. We have to do mathematical integration. That's where your calculus kind of comes in, where you actually integrate over time steps in the vertical and in the horizontal space. This is what, four dimensions, right? You got to integrate. And doing all of that science takes a lot of smarts. I have a little bit of it, just a little tiny piece of that smarts, but there's a lot of other people that have, we all kind of together come together and make a whole unit and be able to provide some of the best forecasts. And I want you guys to really be tough on us at NOAA and the National Weather Service on our hurricane forecast. I think we're getting a lot better. We really are. Follow them. We just put out, I think we put out a prediction just the other day that we'll still be above normal with respect to our hurricane activity this year. Follow up on those kind of things, because all of that is predictions and projections. These are educated guesses.
Yes, sir. We'll do that. In fact, let's have this dialogue on October 18th, or when we actually have it in October, because it is relevant. Because you just answered probably one of the questions we saw earlier about compute at the edge, or edge computing, and or compute at the tactical edge. But one of the things that we touched on last year for Exascale Day was basically having that horsepower at the edge. And then, so what we'll do is we'll bring it back in October, because everything you said, we now have 1 terabyte in our hands. Some of the new smartphones now we have that processing in our hands. And then whether or not satellites can do that pre-processing before it sends it to our devices. So those are areas that we would love to talk about in October. And for us, one of the things that I think, going back to the question, is one of the discoveries is that being able to have these alerts show up on your smartphone.
Yeah.
When we have these emergencies, and these alerts typically may be thunderstorms, tornadoes, especially tornadic activity and things of that nature.
Right. That's the smartphone is another disruptive technology that's changing the way we all receive information. To have a terabyte of storage on a cell phone, right? Is crazy to me. That is like mind blowing, because I still remember the days where, if you look at all of the weather prediction models that we run, and we run a lot of them,
right?
We produce a lot of data, and I can only imagine. I could probably run some of our weather prediction models, especially a simple one, on our computer right now, on our cell phone right now. That's crazy.
It is. And we're about to wrap up. We have a couple of questions. One was about, they wanted to know, when you said there were only 2 people on the Hill with science backgrounds, I think the question was that because there are not many science offerings in K through 12, other than chemistry, biology, or physics? That small. Was that something that we have to do a better job in getting more people on the Hill?
I think we have to do a better job of, scientists being interested in policy issues. Okay. And most scientists, you become a STEM person because you really want to solve the problems of today, right? But the link to policy and major national issues for scientists, I don't think it's really there. But we absolutely need more scientists to run for office, especially in Congress, whether it be on the House side or the Senate side.
Okay. We had another question. We, as you know, we started working with junior ROTC units throughout BDPA, and the Air Force has been one of our major sponsors to get sponsor their memberships and sponsor registration for our events. And one of the questions from their team is, what role does the military play with NOAA operations?
Well, we definitely partner in certain areas. The military, in terms weather information in general, is very, very important to the military. Of course, the Air Force with their flying of planes into different areas. The forecast is absolutely important. They use our information, NOAA's information. We share information with them. They share some information with us. A lot of the data that they collect is probably a little bit more classified because they're the military, so we can't accept everything that they do. But we work together on data assimilation, We work together on development of weather prediction models and the products. The products are extremely important. At the end of the day, the product is the most important thing because that's the information that you use to actually make a decision. And so we work closely with them on those particular areas.
And 2 more questions. One is, what are some of the modeling apps or tools available for middle and high school students to use either at their STEM fairs or even for us for BDPA's mobile app showcase? Anything
well, no particular application on your phone, okay. But what I've seen and what I've heard, I mentioned it, is that young people can download our unified forecast system code and basically get it running on, like a PlayStation.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah. So if you as a young person, you could spend a Saturday, especially if you know a little bit about coding and have some kind of background in terms of computer science or are interested in computer science. I've seen young people and heard of young people running it on their laptops and running it on their PlayStation. So you just gotta figure out how to do it. Basically, I haven't tried it yet, but maybe one of these days I'll try it on my PlayStation 3. I don't have the PlayStation 5 yet.
So the good news is all the kids in our program, as you know, are coders. So
oh, that's awesome.
And so what I'll do, and many of them are actually online right now. So what we'll do is we'll put that on, we'll make that a high priority to actually move that into the gaming for gamification, that into that platform. And we're moving a lot of our data right now into virtual reality, augmented reality. So we'll take both because that takes us into our next
challenge.
Yes, sir. That takes us in our next and last question is how can BDPA work with Noaa to provide new UFS and HPC resources in underserved communities and HBCU chapters that we are serving?
Well, that is absolutely something that we really want to do. And I think with Epic coming on board as a new community partner, maybe there'll be some opportunities with BDPA working with Epic and working with other Noaa modelers where we can do some challenges, some code sprints to try to figure out how to work together on some of these more challenging issues. And maybe we can do something in the future. I think we can do something in the future. We just got to make it happen.
Yes, sir. Agreed. And we cannot have a connected planet without Noaa.
That's right. We take the pulse of the planet. We got plenty of data for you guys to play with for sure. And
yes,
big
sir.
Data is another thing that I didn't really talk about that I think BDPA, taking some of our data, whether it be radar data and using it in, ArcGIS or something like that, just doing some different challenges.
Yes, sir. And if anybody does ask, what does BDPA stand for? Big Data and Predictive Analytics.
All right.
All right, sir. This has been fun. If any other questions come in, I'll be more than happy to share it with your team and everything. But thank you so much for sharing a Saturday morning with us once again. And we really appreciate this. Words can explain how fun this was and how much we really appreciate this.
All right. Thanks, Perry, for the invite again. Appreciate you, sir.
When I chose to go to the Air Force Academy, people asked if I was going to be a pilot. Sure, I could do that. I can also be an engineer. I can be a doctor or a lawyer. I can work with missiles or satellites. I can become an astronaut, a Rhodes Scholar, or a 4-star general. I can be an Olympian, or even a national hero. So yeah, I can be a pilot. At the Air Force Academy, I can be anything.